No, but
That's awesome.
it looks better on camera than in real life, I think.
Looks great.
Okay, we are ready.
I'm in the screen now. Okay, I'm going on mute.
All right.
And yes, Lauren, I know what you're going to say. I already took care of it. We are live on Facebook. We are recording. And I just want to say hello to everyone and welcome to today's growth conversation on the complexities of revolution, understanding the struggle for justice and our opportunity to ally. Today's presenters are Dr. Micah McCreary and Dr. Rob Fazio, who will introduce themselves shortly. At this time, I want to let you know that we will record the entire call, including the Q&A section, so we can reach more people who aren't available today. A quick reminder that this is an educational community-based session. It is not therapy and is intended to be a discussion that has takeaways we can learn from. On holdthedoor.com, you can find additional resources. Everyone will be muted, as we already saw, and you can unmute yourself during the second half of the session during Q&A. If you have any questions and want to write them down, please use the chat function in Zoom to send them. And you can either send them publicly or you can send them directly to me, the host, and I will read them out for you. We'll read your questions during the second half of the discussion during Q&A. If you haven't already, set your display to speaker view in the upper right-hand side of your screen to just see the person that's speaking. And for those just joining us, welcome to the discussion. And I'll now turn it over to Dr. Rob Fazio. Rob?
Thank you, Jeff Hummel. Appreciate that. Welcome everyone to our growth conversation. It is quite an honor to be spending this hour with you. I know that there's obviously a lot going on in our country and around the world, ranging from a pandemic to a lot of racism challenges, as well as protesting, things getting misunderstood, rioting. And Hold the Door, historically, as many of you may know, has always focused on growth through loss and adversity. And when each situation comes up, whether it's a crisis enough, we believe that we have resources that help people do a couple things. One is to help them get into a right state of mind to have conversations, and two is to help give tools and resources to get through the process. I also realize that when it comes to the topic of what's going on, at least in America right now, it's a very sensitive topic, and I am not an expert on racism. So what I do in my times of need is I go to my strength, and my strength is the people that I have fortunate to have around me and around us. And so Dr. McCreary has been a part of the Hold the Door family since day one. There would be no Hold the Door without Jackie and Micah McCreary. And he and I have been partnering on helping people grow through loss and adversity for the last, well, I'll say 20 years, because Mike and I met about 20 years ago. He was my mentor at VCU in Richmond. But then for the last 18 years or so, through Hold the Door, we've been doing that together. And we have a philosophy that we all helped create when we help people deal with trauma or loss, that we want them to do a few things. And this will surprise you for most of the people that know you. We did look at the research around trauma and adversity, and we wanted to find some of the common factors. And those of you that do know me well, is it has to be simple and memorable, and people have to be able to use it. So we distilled all of our Hold the Door philosophy around 3 words: connect, care, and challenge. And each of us will be really, probably are better at one or the other. I am really good at the challenge, and I jump to action and challenge. This evening, we're going to focus on connect and care. And my role in this is going to be trying to understand more. What one of our team members, Lauren Hoffman, reached out to me when this was all going on and said, can Hold the Doors do something? And my first response was, Lauren, I don't know, but I can talk to Micah about it. And when I hopped on the phone with Micah, we talked it through a little bit, and a few things in that conversation, like all the conversations. First thing is, he picks up the phone and I say, I say, hey, Micah, how's it going? And he's like, good. He's like, how's it going? I say, good. He goes, doesn't sound like it, Rob. And I was like, oh, man. And by the way, that's the first time he's ever said that to me. He was my supervisor when I was getting trained in clinical, in psychology and in counselor psychology in the clinical. Got to make that distinction because some people might get upset about that, right? So my point there was, he's so in tune with people and in the moment, which is such a powerful thing that he brings. And I talked him through what was bothering me was that there's so much pain going on and so much polarization, and I felt like we couldn't do anything. So we talked about it. We tend to really have quick and deep conversations. We get deep very quick. And I said, Micah, this is a risk for Hold the Door and me. I don't know if he can take that risk. And right away he said is, Rob, I don't know if we can't take that risk. And so that's why we're here tonight. We start with strength, which is our friendships and our relationships. And what I realized, a privilege that I have, is I have people like Micah in my life. And not everyone has a space where they can ask questions without being judged. And I wanted to have a conversation with Micah. You could see how the two of us interact. And I also wanted you to have an opportunity to have some Q&A. If at the end of this hour, people decide they would like more, Micah and I have already decided we will do another one of these based on the level of interest. So with that, let me turn it over to Micah. And please, Micah, just start wherever you'd like us to.
Okay. Well, hello again, family. It's good to be here. I guess the first thing I wanted to say was that picture. I love that picture. But I can't see how Rob got Kelly and how I got Jackie. That's just the only piece. It's like, that seems like Kelly, I don't know. I mean, I worry, it's like, the creator must have been with us both, so it looks so great. Having oh gosh, that looks good. Okay, now that was my heart. I'm blown away. No matter what happens, no matter how many riots, I'll look at that picture from now on and I'll be happy, which is really where we are. Second thing, geez, I have been so torn up by the whole thing. I guess I'll start there with who I am. Those who don't know me, I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, was a child there during the 60s. And so I was there during the 1967 riot and during the 1968 riot when Martin Luther King was killed. And my memories to this day were, one, the house next door to us being firebombed and burning down, and my father I'm the oldest of 7 children, and throwing us in the bathtub to keep us safe. And then it was walking down the street with him, and the National Guard were called into Detroit. And actually the tanker turning the muzzle of the tank on my father and I. And this little guy, I'm looking down the muzzle of this tank. And then afterwards, riding around, seeing the devastation. And then the personal piece, the tragedy of my life probably was my father having a nervous breakdown, and found out later his PTSD from being in the Korean War and being tortured was activated by the riots. And my dad lost his mind, lost his soul, lost his heart, and left us. And so we went from being working class, doing okay in Detroit, to struggling. And as the oldest child, I had to deal with what it was like with my mom, to not having she hadn't worked up to that point. I had to get a job, figure out what to do with our lives. And we were on age-dependent children and all the welfare, whatever it was called. And so all those things came as a result of riots. So when I see riots, when I see the pain that people are going through, it's not a pleasant memory. And so when we look at it, a lot of people frame riots as revolutions, as opportunities to actually speak against the system. And they're so complicated. So I love our title, The Complexities of Revolution, because the thing is, and I think we want to make things so simple, they're easier to digest. They're easier to take in when you make them simple. But anyone here, hi, Susie Fife. Anyone here who
John Fife too.
Yeah, I'm like, wow. I could do it about a number of you all, but I hadn't seen Susie in like 20 years, so that she caught me off guard. And the thing is that I have no idea where I was. Rob, you're contagious.
You were talking about people tend to want to simplify, which I agree, especially in the States. We go right from A to B. So the way I was raised, something's wrong, you fix it. So it literally does become yes or no, black or white, right or left. And you were saying there's something to the complexity that we need to understand.
Yeah, thank you. And like with my dad, I spent maybe 10 to 15 years angry with him for leaving and didn't understand the sincere severity of the pain and the trauma he experienced through that situation, which added to his demise and his fall. And I think, if we who are healers, who are growth consultants, who have gone through trauma, when you think about the pain that you have, the difficulties you face in your life, they aren't simple. But we can always, the psychological term for it, where everything about us makes sense, but about someone else is a lot less of there's a term for that.
The attribution theory
confirmation,
or something like that?
Confirmation bias. Yeah, confirmation bias. And so that's kind of where that is. And so think about that as well. So I can go on for days, but I really wanted to just answer questions and talk some more. What do you think?
Okay. Yeah, let me throw out a couple questions here. One of them is that I'm noticing a lot of polarization. So I have friends that I can dialogue with about both things, and what I'm seeing now at the peak of the emotion of everything that's going on is a complete disconnect between the other person's experience. Yeah. So from my perspective, my friends that I try to explain and talk to, that although rioting is difficult to see and it is ruining businesses, one thing that you taught me through a number of times and things that you sent me is Martin Luther King talking about it's the unheard providing a voice or something to that. So can you just help us understand why in the world someone would riot and wreck property?
Yeah, and this one is so complicated because as we saw in DC, a lot of the rioters themselves are not the rioters that are being blamed for the riots. So a lot of the protesters are really there protesting nonviolently, protesting in a just manner. And it's other people's politics that are actually causing the fires. I've talked to more folk to where it's been extreme people from the right who are causing the problem, stirring up things because they want to justify the position of our president. People from the extreme left who recognize that if you just protest and march, it often doesn't bring you the results that you want. But when there starts being fires and burnings and all these problems, then you're on every television station. And so you get these two populations, and you get the middle group of folk who are trying to nonviolently protest. It becomes crazy that way. You also get, even within the African-American community, which I think is the center of a lot of this, I was talking to one friend, and literally there was a gentleman who was in his 30s who wanted to be nonviolent. There's another gentleman he was having a conversation with who was in his 40s, and he wanted to be violent. And they're carrying on this discussion about which one is right. And so there's not this clean, common, what is it to be Black, what is it to be white? The same diversity we have in any population is there as well. And then they were having a conversation, of course, you get someone from who is a much more radical protesting person with someone who wants to bring about justice. And you get those two warring against each other. That's there as well. I think the other piece about property and being burned is when you don't have anything, you're rich, there's a landlord, you've been systematically and systemically pushed into a position where there's nothing you feel you can do, then the anger's got to come out. And when the anger comes out against those objects that are there, we lived in Richmond for a great while. So the objects that are there are the statues of the Confederate heroes and sheroes down, there were no sheroes,
No.
heroes down the street. And, you know, your anger comes out at them and you want to do that as well. And so you've got to direct it. So you can't buy these nice things. Your anger comes out. You burn down a store. It's not really burning down your community because you don't have anything. They never burn down their own homes. You burn down somebody else's or the landlord that owns it. And you're close to being put out of your house anyway. So it's that piece.
Interesting. You mentioned Richmond. So there's a story out today that General Lee is actually coming down of Monument Avenue, which has been a long time coming. For those of you who don't know, in Richmond, Virginia, Monument Avenue is this famous, wealthy street that's is renowned. The history of Richmond is it's also the capital of the Confederacy. So they have people that led the Confederacy, statues of all them on this down this street. And then to make things feel better, they put a statue of Arthur Ashe. And as you know, a white male coming into that community for the first time, it just didn't make sense to me. And it's actually really awesome that Susie and John are on the call today, because my experience of being in Richmond was I was so out of place just from being a guy from New Jersey, like and in Richmond, and I'll never forget one day John used to teach me things about the Black community, which was the coolest things, and simple things that I never would have thought of, like the way people would talk to me or hand me change in stores that with my white privilege, I never would have understood. And Micah, in your multicultural counseling class, that was the first time I even heard about white privilege. I think that's a term that gets thrown around a lot, but can you just talk to us about what that means and what we all can do to, one, be aware of those biases, but also two, what we do with people that do have white privilege and don't know it.
Yeah, I don't know about white privilege because I guess there's some white people in my family somewhere, but
wait, I thought we were family. Wait, what happened?
yeah, but I mean, very true, good point. But
yeah, I got you.
But I do know about male privilege, for example, and when I walk into a place as a man, there are just certain advantages that I have over a woman because of the pieces that are just there in our society. The same thing now and it's really weird because I'm in a family where the majority of my family are still poor. And, I've been fortunate to make it out of the inner city and into a decent paying job for 30 or so years now. And so I have class privilege as well. And it's amazing when I'm really working with a woman and people just assume that I'm the authority, she's much smarter. I mean, for example, I know my wife way, way smarter than I'll ever be, but it's assumed I'm in charge. And I remember the church we used to pastor together, we became pastors because she couldn't get a church as a woman. And so we did the church together as a couple so that she could pastor, because she's the pastor. I am not, you don't want me to be anybody's pastor. I don't have that kind of compassion and regard. It's just not in me. I'm a prophet, I'm a radical, and so I think it's the same thing when it comes to white, Black, is that they're just not even just the things that have happened over time to where, because of redlining, because of segregation, because of Black laws, because of, Jim Crow laws, that people of color have not been able to accumulate resources and wealth. And where it's passed down for people who don't have color sometimes, who are beige. And so you get all these things going on that way. And so you get, we both get to college together at the same time. I'm there, I hitchhike to get to college. I don't have any resources. I'm actually doing better than anybody else in my family, where another person would come to the same college and have resources and opportunities there as well. So, and if we don't recognize that, like I'm dedicated to being anti-sexist. I'm dedicated to making sure that women are moved into positions and get opportunities in their life. That's just a commitment I've made. I'm anti-maleness in that way, not trying to diminish what I am as a man. I want to be a man, but I want to make sure that I never have my foot on a woman's neck in any kind of way, you know, and that's a purposeful metaphor, by the way.
I love that. Here's why I love that. One of my biggest pet peeves is when something happens, everyone rushes to help, right? There's a crisis, someone dies, there's a riot, there's a pandemic. Everyone's an expert, everyone jumps in. And in that time span of when the crisis is going on, every CEO is on TV, everyone's talking about what they're going to doing. And my beef is that goes away in a couple of months, if not sooner. And so you saying the dedication piece, I think the dedication and eventually we have to get to is talking about allyship, because that's even more important. But what you just said is that you made a decision to be dedicated, which then makes you take action and do things or not do things. So it's always front of mind. So that's one key, is where it has to be front of mind. The other thing you mentioned is about systemic. I don't know if you remember this. We only had one disagreement when I was in graduate school, and we were just one. And we were talking about the idea of systems theory or cognitive behavioral. And I had just come from a sports psychology program and cognitive behavioral, and we were dialoguing about this. And you're like, Rob, it's a system. Like, Micah, it's the person, it's the individual. They have a choice. They always have a choice. So you're talking about system. And I think this is where sometimes I go wrong and people go wrong, is because they don't realize how powerful the system is. So can you talk a little bit about systems?
Yeah, it's, you know, we love to use the bootstrap illustration where I can just tie up my boots and do okay. And that is true. Individual strength, individual power, individual effort is important. But no matter how important you are, if the system is set up to stop you from moving outside of your particular skills as an individual, it'll never happen. I know that more doors have been opened for me because of relationships, you know, that have allowed me to break the system and break the cycle. And we have to have that, you know, and it's amazing when you look at redlining. Is just one of the easiest systemic things to think about, that, you know, there were areas where owners of banks and real estate agencies drew lines where this is an area where you cannot live in as a person of color. And so no matter how you tried to go to that area, you couldn't be there. We literally, I remember when my wife and I bought our home in Richmond, we had to go in and sit down with the lawyer, and they went through the clause in the community and scratched through things where it said no one who was Jewish, no one of color could ever live there. I mean, I'm like, this is 1993, but they were still going through and changing the things that were written in there to keep that neighborhood in a certain location. And it was funny because we were talking the other day, and over the 21 years we owned that home in that neighborhood, there was never another person of color that moved into that neighborhood, you know. And how do those things happen? And of course, when the neighborhood has a certain income level, then that income goes into the school system, goes into the community. And so the schools get better, the community gets better, investments get better. When it's limited in what you get and the amount of persons and the income that can be in that community, it limits the investment in the school, it limits the number of persons that are there. And so it becomes a whole system and a whole cycle. And I think that's what America has done well. It's amazing to me because one of the core values and you can find in everything about America is that we value liberty, we value freedom, and we value racism. You know, it is there clearly in all of the research that this is something that is just valued. We don't recognize we gave the whole racist system to the Germans. You know, that came from us. You know, and so you get the whole issue of, you know, whether it's the syphilis study, Tuskegee syphilis study that went on, and so many other studies where we just really made sure and did things that were to maintain the power and the status of white America, which is not a bad thing, except for it also prevents others. So it's like, how do you do it in a way that is equitable, that the playing field is really level? And the playing field has not been leveled. And that's not whining. I'm careful because I don't like to whine.
Yeah.
You know me, I'm like, bring it, I can handle it. But the
But
reality
we're gonna bring it. Let's have some real dialogue
Okay.
here. I'm picking up what you're putting down. So one of the things that I see happening, I'll use myself as an example. Racism is a word, and it's very easy to not give that word power or attention because I'm not racist, right?
I'm not racist.
Right. However, I have had conversations with people that have said things where I've said that's racist. I would see that as racist. A lot of the challenges come in. If there's not a safe place that dialogue, I feel like it gets more polarizing and people get more pulled apart. So you're always someone that's welcoming the conversation. What are your thoughts on that? Like, because I find myself sometimes less comfortable entering the conversations, which is probably an indication that I should enter more.
Yeah. I think those who are really into psychology know you cannot have the answers and really be a good psychologist because you've never really been there where that person is. And I think too often we prevent ourselves from growing because we're afraid, we're afraid of what we're going to run up against. And the reality is that's why we have so much divisiveness anyways, because we're afraid of each other. And the only way to really move past a lot of the fear is to have the relationships, is to develop the allies. And we get this cyclical piece going to where, there's this polarization. I can't stand your view. One of the gifts my parents gave me was that one parent was Republican and one was Democrat. And so we had these great discussions in the house about why somebody, it was the party of Lincoln. I'm like, what does that mean? And, you look at it and it's like, this is good. And I think the more we have those heated discussions, the less we'll abuse and manipulate and traumatize each other because we become friends, we become close. I mean, I'm glad you and I disagreed on that one thing. I think I've got about 10 on my list, but that's okay.
Right. That's good.
And if Pike would chime in, he's got another 10.
Well, the first failed dissertation proposal, that was your fault. That wasn't mine.
Whatever.
No, and so just to be transparent and humble, I'm literally, just like every good Italian American, in my Italian aunt's basement, and the Wi-Fi is going in and out. So sometimes when there's a spot, everything is freezing. Because
we'll just flow with you when it happens again.
Well, in where we are in New Jersey, power's been out for 2 days and maybe tonight as well. So it's Ashe, right? Ashe. And I really liked a lot of times which I know is a privilege thing, I'll see things in the media where people come out with op-eds and now everyone's out and athletes are talking about it, and I'd be like, here we go again. I did really take to heart Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's op-ed, and you sent that to me and I heard it on the news too, and his analogy or metaphor about racism and dust. And he talked about racism being like dust. It's always been here. And Will Smith said the similar thing. It's like, it's here. We're just videoing it now. We're filming it now. And I realize more and more how ignorant I have been around racism, thinking I understood it. But I think in recent years, I'm seeing it's much worse than I ever imagined.
Yeah. And I wouldn't use the word ignorant about it. I mean, because it's people, we see through the lens that we see through, and that lens is important. And if no one helps you become conscious of your lens, you know, I mean, if you don't take the glasses off and realize, oh, I've had these colored glasses on, you're going to see it through that shade. And we have to be helped to remove the lens. For example, I don't know if we thought about it, but it was interesting to me to hear President Trump respond to the Michigan, because I'm from Michigan, I respond to the Michigan protesters who were in the Capitol with revolvers, with rifles, with AKAs, you know, and his response was, those are great protesters, you know, and keep protesting, get our country back on open and running again. And then you get protesters who haven't yet protested, who are people of color. And it's like, when the looting starts, the shooting starts. And I'm like, you know, you've not even seen one set and you have this position. And for another where there are weapons, you have a whole nother position. And I'm like, that's his implicit bias that he doesn't even see, you know? And so we have to really talk with each other. And if we don't have the conversations about the implicit biases, the things that we don't see that we do, we'll continue to do them. They perpetuate themselves over and over and over again. To me, it's got nothing to do with racism as much as it has to do with this person has not had the opportunity, for whatever reason, to examine his own implicit biases and understand, as the chief executive officer of the United States of America, you know, I have these biases. What am I going to do with them? That's really all you can do, because we all have them. But once you are aware of them, then to be held accountable by persons who can actually say, okay, McCreary, you know that if somebody, you know, calls you a name, it will click you back to when you were in Detroit jogging and somebody called you a nigger from the truck and you went off then and you're going to go off now. So be careful, be prepared. They're going to call you that name, and how are you going to respond? You know, you can't say what you said to those groups in that truck. You know, you know, so yeah, you know, I won't say what I said.
I hear you. Thank you. This is the children's program.
Yeah.
So a couple things there. One is you're talking about the more power we have, the more responsibility we have. And I can't tell if you all can hear me right now, but I'll keep talking because it's. Hey, Michael, let me give you a check. Can you? It's stuttering in there, so I'm going to keep talking unless someone tells me not to. Important it is for you to be able to help people out and understand that. The other thing is that
I think you're saying something. You got
ways. It's dedication to trying to influence others, as well as you yourself being dedicated to make a difference and taking action and being aware of your biases.
Okay, so now you have to say that whole thing over again. Now that you're back. No, you're still gone. Okay, so I think Rob was going to ask me about, Rob's gone completely. I think he was going to ask me about responsibility, and I'm not sure. He's coming back. Kelly, why'd you put him out of the house?
I know. I have the baby and the dog, and we thought we were sending him to the quiet spot. And now I feel awful.
No. I think he's back. His picture's back. John, you want to add anything? What are you thinking about John Fife?
Hey Doc, how you doing?
Good, man. How you doing?
Good. It's good to see you. I just want everyone to know who Dr. McCreary is, at least to me. I came to Richmond, Virginia to work with him and to be with him. I had a request back in '99. I was looking for a mentor, and in my spiritual tradition, I asked for some very specific things. I wanted a person who was not just a psychologist, but a great father, great husband, great man, great leader in the community, someone who was physically fit. I had a list of things literally that I wanted, and met this man and checked every single thing off. And it was it was the indication to me from my higher power, who I call God, that this was the man that I should be under and should allow to mentor me. And so I'm here. I'm an associate professor of psychology at Virginia State University, really because of this guy right here. The one thing I would just say is I think it's important for us to begin to redefine words that we hear and understand what they mean. And for me, I've been kind of going through things that I hear. You know, we talk about racism, and I think defining what individual racism is, what cultural racism is, what institutional racism is, but a simple term like discrimination. To discriminate means to divide. I mean, when we have kids, we teach them how to discriminate between what they can drink and eat and what they can't. But discrimination is not just in action or what someone can do to hurt you. Discrimination can also be seen in inaction. And I think Dr. King is the one who said, you know, in the end, what we will remember is not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. And I think it's important to remember that, as Dr. McCreary was indicating, if I'm a man and I see women being discriminated against and I say nothing, then I become a part of that system that is discriminating. So I just wanted to throw that in, because that's one of the things that I've been trying to focus on and trying to kind of lead and guide, you know, my family and my kids to understanding that discrimination can also be inaction. Thank you.
And Dr. Fife brings up what we'll get to later, which is the whole issue of allies. I think that's one of the strengths of Hold the Door, our community, is that we really become allies for each other. And an ally is someone who can really just support you. I remember while we were at VCU, the three of us, that I was actually going to leave faculty because I had just finished a 2-year grant, and the data had been destroyed in a flood or something. And my mentor at that time, I was a professor, but a higher mentor, had really just, I think, had been dishonest in a lot of things that he had done. And so I had gone to my strength. I had actually called a church, had candidated, and had an offer to become pastor of a church. And I walked into the faculty and I mentioned that I was just frustrated with the way things were going. And one of the senior faculty members stood up in the faculty meeting and said, I've invested in Micah. We really want him to stay here, and let's do something. And they actually then allowed me to recruit in 2 faculty members to work with me. And from there, my impact grant came, a lot of other things happened, but it was because of this gentleman, this white male faculty member, standing up and saying, hey, you know, let's support him. And those are the kind of things that allies do. As John Fife was saying, they're not quiet, even if it means that they'll lose something. I think too often in America, we've got this zero-sum game where it's all about us and what we need and what we can accomplish. And the thing is that nothing is really ever accomplished without sacrifice from someone. And if no one's willing to sacrifice, then we all wind up just committed to our own sphere, and we never really build things the way they should be. Hey, Rob, you made it back, Dr. Fazio.
Do you want me to hop out? I get in text like, it's going awesome. Stay off, dude. Stay off.
No, sir. No, sir.
What's up, Fife? I'm glad you're here, man. Keep going, Doc. Keep going.
What's up, dude?
Did Kelly send you that email that says stay off? No.
I got 6 of them.
But see, that's allies right there. That's family. You know,
Yeah.
Did Christine send you one? I know. All right.
So I heard you talking about, go ahead, go.
No, nothing. But the part is I think with allies too, it really helps you understand the struggle. I think too often we don't want this toxic charity where persons just connect with other persons to just really make themselves feel better. I feel guilty, what is it, white guilt? There's a lot of it. I feel guilty about what's happened, what my ancestors did, what my predecessors did, and so I'm going to help you out. That's not helpful. But when you can literally say, I'm going to join you in your struggle, even if it means that I lose some power. My wife and I pastored together. Kelly, I lost so much credibility. People were like, what kind of man are you? You need your wife in there with you to help you do it. I lost so much, people would look down on who I was as a man because I was in ministry with a woman. But that was a consequence of my partnering, my allying, that I was willing to sacrifice. It felt better for me to be authentic and real with her. I mean, I figured we could raise our daughter together and do a good job parenting. We could do a better job with the church. That was my thinking. But I didn't realize the cost that had. I didn't get a lot of invitations I used to get to come preach because people had issues with women being ministers and being leaders in the church. And so anytime we choose to ally, it typically is going to result in a sacrifice. Be okay with that. That's what I always tell folks. Be okay with that. It's okay to hurt. I love this statement that I'm trying to think of, what did he say? Let me find it. Okay, I'll come back to it.
So Mike, I have a question. I realize
Yes.
You don't represent every Black male in the universe, but would love to get your perspective on this. So there are times when I feel like I do want to be an ally, or I know people that do want to be allies, but we're not sure how to approach that, especially right now when things are things are so polarizing and tough. I don't want to come across as like, oh, to be the white man riding in on the horse, or like,
Right.
So how just from your personal opinion, like, how do you start that dialogue as someone who isn't of color?
I think it's being yourself. That, to me, that's the core piece. If you're going to ally with someone, you don't want to be hypocritical. You don't want to come outside of who you are as a person.
Okay.
I remember two of my best allies and I don't mean this, well, if it sounds bad, it does, but one was a lesbian female, one was a gay male, and one was Black, one was white. They became my allies on faculty, and I'm heterosexual. I'm a man who loves women. That's just me, and it was a major piece to deal with that. But Kathy Ingram and I mean, it was like we were a force to be reckoned with. And that, Kevin Allison, a force to be reckoned with. But they didn't try to stop being who they were to help me. And I didn't try to stop being who I was to help them. And that's the piece. The quote I was thinking about was from Errol Ozan, where he says, some beautiful paths cannot be discovered without getting lost. Some beautiful paths cannot be discovered without getting lost. And I think we're so afraid of getting lost that we miss some beautiful paths, that we miss some opportunities to really see some things differently because we're fearful. And I just tell people all the time, look, it's already messed up. So you can't mess it up too much more. So stop being fearful and get out there and do what you can, whatever that is. It's one more person in the struggle is better than no more persons in the struggle, even if they're crazy, like us.
Cool.
I wish you all could have been there with John Fife, Rob Fazio, and Micah McCreary on campus. I don't need to say anything more than that. That's all I'm going to say.
I got to tell a quick funny
From
story about John and
Hawaii.
I. One quick, oh, that's right, riding mopeds in Hawaii. One quick story, and then I want to open up the question. So John and I are in like our third, fourth year, and we had a bond because three of us had lost our dads all within a short period of time. So John and I find out in a meeting that we're going to lose our fellowship money funding. I don't know what happened. So we're walking down the block, and and we're talking, and we're like, what are you going to do? And John, John's like, I'm going to go and I'm going to pray and I'm going to talk to family and talk to loved ones. And I looked at him like, are you crazy? I'm sending resumes. I'm calling my friends. It's like, and we both got our funding. I don't know how, but it's just.
But those are the kind of ally moments that we do. And we're so different. you know, you came from two different perspectives on that, but you brought it together and overcame together, and that's the deal, you know. But
yeah, cool. Let's
Yes.
open it up. Let's ask some questions of Dr. McCreary or anyone else who'd like to join in the conversation. Please do.
I just want to share one thing. And Rob, you asked the question about, you know, how do you kind of connect or offer your help? And, you know, I saw it actually. I don't know if you remember when we were in school, Micah had us do this sculpture exercise in multicultural class, because we had a tremendous amount of racial tension within the class.
Yes.
And we were in this room and he asked us to create a shape based on the position of the class and our bodies to indicate where we are in our hearts in terms of how we feel about the situation. And I was in the corner with my arms folded like this, and I was kind of like in my black man pose, like, hey, I'm not taking any crap from anybody. Right? And then there were some people who were on the floor in the corner, and Rob, you were in the middle with your hands open because you were always trying to help, like, what can I do? And I think that leads us back to the question, because all we have to do is really state the obvious. And I think Micah is so right in that a lot of times our fear of what we may say wrong or not right will make us be silent. And silence is really the worst place to go. It's better to say something and make a mistake, but one of the things we can do is we can just say, hey, I don't know what to do in this moment. And I've had a number of my white friends reach out to me and say, hey, John, I don't know what to say or do. I just want you to know I'm here if you want to talk. And that makes a difference as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that story. I do remember, I do remember the tension. I do remember us being close. So I appreciate that. Other thoughts, questions? Please. Shauna.
Hello. Thank you both for, well, thank you everyone for the contributions on the call so far today. I really appreciate the conversation. I have a colleague who called me just last week. She's a mother. She's a Black American. She has 3 young teenager, young adult men boys that she's raising. She's incredibly upset when she called me, I guess possibly looking for comfort and or just a sounding board or just to listen. I guess that was the first time that anyone has reached out to me, possibly in an ally role, but I didn't know at that time that that's what I was. So I felt a little bit lost on what do I do. I didn't prepare for this moment. And so how do I move forward on this phone call with someone who was clearly upset? And now I'm sad and crying. And so does that help or not help? Because I can't help but have empathy for the situation of her and her children who are looking to her, like, what is my education worth in this world? Why do I work so hard? Will it pay off? Anyway, I just share that story because I clearly didn't solve anything for her, her boys, her family, the situation, but I didn't really know if just listening was the right thing. Could I have helped in any other way if I'm ever in a situation where I could be a better person for someone going through a moment?
Doc, what do you think?
Which Doc?
That's right. It could be Dr. Fife, Dr. Fazio, he's pointing to you. I mean, I'm happy to go, but go ahead. I'm
you
freezing,
should go.
so go.
No, you go.
Shauna, first of all, good for you for bringing that up. Good for you for being real in the moment. And that's the stuff, from my humble opinion, that moves people. You said that you didn't do anything. I disagree. I'm not one big on like just actively listen. It's listening with caring and understanding that I think really connects people and moves people. If the only thing you did was that person left that conversation, it said, you know what, I could talk to that person again. In my view, I think you started an allyship.
Ditto. Rashada, really accept that you're great and that you're powerful, and you gave that gift to that person. That's what I was going to say, which is so wonderful. And so often, I think so many of us on this screen, we do so much, we give so much, and we don't take the time to celebrate our own selves and to be thankful. And sometimes the only person that knows you did a good job is you. And so, you know, applaud yourself.
Micah.
Hey.
First of all, hi. Thank you for
Sweetie, you don't want to
talking,
ask me a question? You don't want to ask me a question?
You know, a lot of us on the call are in the academy. We're teachers of some sort. And I've been really struck right now in these situations where I don't feel like I want to be a learner and not a teacher. But if we're in these roles sometimes, I don't want to pass up a chance to have these hard conversations, you know, in a group. And sometimes they kind of get skirted over because of discomfort. And then I feel like it's just a missed opportunity for people to dialogue. So I've been trying to figure out, maybe in those situations, like, are there, and this could be across any topic, right? It can be directly related to racism, or anytime there's like a tension and differences of opinions, and you just do things so well in terms of how you teach and share and creates like this space for dialogue. I'm wondering if question asking is a way to go about that, or what are some of the tactics you use every day that I notice that I wish that I was paying attention to specifics to have these conversations and do what you do, and kind of how could we translate that to different settings?
Yeah, wow. I think you do it, of course, but I thought about when you were saying that Paulo Freire's concept of the banking theory of education, that so often our system and our training says that we are the knowledgeable one, the one with all of the information, and therefore we should pour that knowledge into empty vessels. And those of us like yourself who have rejected that theory recognize that no, it's a problem-solving model. And it's a model. Bell Hooks was teaching me once a long time ago that you need to have your own personal narratives that you are willing to share. Because when you share your narrative, it stops you from being that invisible interrogator and is a person that they can actually connect to. And so I think that's just been ingrained in my thinking now, is that I will listen and I try not to over self disclose, because that takes the focus off of the person and puts it onto me. But I'll use the emotions that I'm having, that I'm feeling based upon what they're sharing, and just kind of share that emotion in something that I say back to them, and just keep pulling them together. The only thing I thought about too while you was talking was, I wanted to put out a presidential statement about this whole thing, and people were sending me other presidents and what they were saying, and I felt bad because I'm stuck. I can't get it out for some reason. I can't produce this document, and I try, and it was amazing to me that every day I was trying, I wasn't getting mine done because someone was calling me who had to do theirs, and I was talking to them about theirs. And I looked up, and by the time today, I finally got mine out today, but I had examples of 4 other persons' statements that I had really helped them. And I could find myself in their statement where I had listened to them and I had helped them. And so what I did was I took the parts from theirs that I had helped them with and put it into mine. And then, went on and finished mine with some things I had about the Holy Saturday, what concept I've been working with for about a month now. And it just, eventually it happened, and it was kind of cool, I'm trying to get my wife to come over and get on the screen with me, but she's like, no. Okay.
Jackie, come on.
That
She's
doesn't
gone.
surprise me, Micah.
Yeah.
that happens, that you were helping others narrate, and yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing. And yeah. So I've got
go ahead, Mike. Go ahead, please.
No, I'm just saying I've got like a went out for all of the African American presidents of seminaries, and so I'm on that one now because of that conference and 2 or 3 others. And then I did finally finish mine today because my communications person is going on vacation, so I had no choice. It wasn't as good as I would have wanted it to be, but it's done. Yes, sir.
I was just thinking what you're saying is like, sometimes we feel like we need to be the expert, and sometimes that's true, but sometimes it's just a matter of, so, you know, knowing the way Kelly approaches working with students, it's how can I be helpful and help you get to the next place, right? And it's almost taking that same approach to those conversations of just having that helpful, creating the atmosphere for those conversations. Because I think, at least in my experience, there's so many turf wars and there's so much of like ego involvement as opposed to I'm just here to try to be helpful. And I think I really genuinely people feel that vibe, and that is helpful for them to create their own answer.
Yeah. And Marcia asked a question about a call to action for the faith community. And I thought about Luke 23, 53 to 54, Marcia, where they take Jesus off the cross, wrap him in linen clothes, and lie him in the grave. And for me, and then that was in preparation for the Sabbath coming, that what the church can do, I think, is to actually help take people down from these crosses and wrap them in linen clothing and lie them in safe places to recover and be restored. Whether we do that through prayer or through actually, but to have that in my mind that this is what I'm doing. There's so many powerful pieces about that. And what that does for a person who's been struggling, like when I'm raging and I'm tripping, I need a safe place. I need friends that I can go to and just, you know, it's gonna be all right. Just get, you know, healed. Let's get a nice cup of coffee and talk, and then go back to the battlefield. It feels like with military work, you know, sometimes once you're injured, you need to come back, you know, and have a wonderful nurse, a physician to take out the bullet, to wrap up the gauze around the injury, and then send you back out to fight again. And the thing about trauma that we learned a while ago was the Army did it better than anybody else, because they would take you off the field, bring you back, sew you up, but then send you back out to keep going again. I think that's what the church can do, is to be that hospital, but to send people back out again, to not let them become so worn out that they say, I'm never gonna fight again. No, you gotta go back. We need every soldier, you know, male and female, adult and child. And there was one other, non-optical anti-ship. You gotta talk about that, Lori. You gotta tell us about that. What?
Oh, yeah, I saw something online describing non-optical allyship. So this was maybe partially in response to the social media kind of black screen trend that happened yesterday or the day before, and it was giving many tips on how to be an effective ally, but they were making a distinction between optical allyship, which is just kind of surface level, doesn't have a lot of action behind it, is kind of performative, and is a little bit more about the person themselves than the people that they're trying to be allies for, versus non-optical allyship, meaning there's substance there, you're willing to get uncomfortable, you're willing to you know, take action and actually, you know, be part of what's happening, rather than kind of standing on the sidelines and cheering, you know, in a way. So I thought that was, I don't know, I hadn't heard it described that way before. And so I think that just that description of that difference in types of allyships was just clarifying for me. It helped me kind of understand what to aim for in terms of allyship, and you know, just what to aim for. And you know, building on what Kelly was saying, you know, you know, several people on the call are in higher education, and we have students that we influence and interact with. Personally, I'm at Penn State in the middle of Pennsylvania, and this is
we are.
Yeah.
Dun, 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 dun,
Yeah.
dun, dun.
So, I mean, this is definitely something that I've been thinking about a lot. I direct a student group, and we do a lot of professional development. And in the past, even when I was teaching in the classroom, I tended to avoid topics that I related with conflict like the plague. Like anything that was going to be the littlest bit, uncomfortable or conflictual, I just avoided it all the time. And I've gradually gotten a little more comfortable with approaching some of those topics. And tonight, in a little less than an hour, my colleague and friend Meg and I are doing a session with our students online that's an open live discussion about George Floyd's death and the protests and everything that's going on. And excuse my language, but it kind of scares the shit out of me that we're doing this, because I feel completely like Kelly was saying, I like to be the expert. I like to, wait till I have all the information, and I'm still learning so much myself, and I'm still kind of just starting into a journey of being an ally and working towards anti-racism. And so it kind of scares me to what feels like prematurely kind of open this up and be like, hey, let's all talk about this. But something that really, something that you just said, Dr. McCreary, that I think makes me feel a little better about jumping into this is that it's already messed up. So it's already messed up. We can't mess it up too much more. So, the students that are coming to the discussion are doing so because they're choosing to. And so they are, we're setting up some kind of guidelines for the discussion in terms of coming to the discussion with humility and kind of checking our own privilege in the discussion. And so I have high hopes that this will be beneficial for everyone involved. It'll be interesting to see who shows up. But I think this is, I don't know. I just think that idea of it's already messed up, so just jump in and start doing work, to me, just really resonated with me.
Yeah, amen. And I think if your heart is right, all you can give is your heart. And if you give a good heart, a right heart, it's going to be what it's going to be. And I think, but it's not, it typically goes awry when the purpose for it is manipulative. Like with you talking about optical allyship, I'm your ally so someone can see me being your ally. And it typically goes bad with those optical allies. And I'm standing here, in this place, because I want you to see me standing with these people, and it's like, and you raise a problem there. And so go for it. Be your true authentic self is the best we can do. And it's the therapists that I've trained over the 20 plus 30 years I've been doing this work were the ones who just say, I'm going to be honest. The researchers, I'm going to honestly know these are my skills. This is what I'm going to do, and go for it that way. So, hey, fly.
Yeah. I think Lauren, go ahead, Lauren Hoffman.
Yeah, just sort of like following up on Lori's dialogue. I wonder if anybody, and this question really could be for anybody, I think a lot of folks are hesitant to start the conversation because they don't know where to start. So do you have any really great sort of first line questions, sort of things to open up these dialogues, whether it's a one-on-one dialogue or a small group dialogue? And then the second part of my question is, I think there's also a lot of people who are feeling called to activism right now, and maybe have for a while. But I'll sort of quote my fourth grader who said the other night, there's so many things wrong, I don't know where to start in terms of helping people, because she won a little contest and had some money she wanted to donate. And I think a lot of adults feel that way too. So I know everyone will have different opinions, but if anybody has any sort of strong thoughts on if you want to go the activism route, what are some really great places to start, whether it's a topic area or a specific organization?
I think, as everyone else chimes in, having your own personal narrative prepared before you open for what, not things you don't want to share, but things that are just public. Like I shared about my riots experience with my father. That was a purposeful opening conversation to really get things going. And so with that topic, I typically try to find some personal narrative that I have that's public, not my secrets. I'm not going to tell you all those, you know, but to get it going as well. I think in this kind of discussion, there are a couple of things on YouTube about oppression that are kid friendly, and maybe even finding one of those to share on the screen before you begin the discussion would be powerful for you and Lori, thinking about, you know, those fourth graders. Others?
I also think about, in my mind, when I do things like this, if I don't have Micah with me or John, I think of humble confidence. So I'm confident, I want to be helpful. I'm confident that I know how to have a general conversation, and I'm humble that things might not go the way. And I put that out there. So kind of like I did tonight as well, saying I'm not an expert on racism, but I couldn't sit back and not have a conversation because of the way I'm built. So I think, you know, there's levels, but just something, putting it out there, prefacing, hey, I was on a call with Dr. McCreary, who's an expert on these things, and here's one thing I learned. And I thought this was an interesting point to start with, because I'm not an expert on it. What do you think of what he said about X? Something like that, you can bring the person in. One person told me in my family systems class that we're all always together, even if we're not in the room. Forget who that was. Forget.
Yeah, we forget. Can you show that slide again you had too about the connect and care? Because I think that's another powerful point.
I can.
There's nothing on your slide.
Did you lock up again, Rob? He might have.
Okay. We had a Facebook question while we're looking for this. Then, do you think the lack of faith is causing more of a feeling of lack of purpose or despair? Do you think that lack of faith is causing more of a feeling of lack of purpose or despair? You want to chime in, Dr. Fife? So while Dr. Fife is thinking about it, I really think it's amazing to me, but a lot of times in scripture, we're gonna talk about faith. I'm Christian, so I'll talk about Christian texts. But a lot of times there are miracle stories there that are done to increase faith, that people go through trauma, they go through difficulty, and God uses that to increase faith. And so for me, I don't look at it as a lack of faith, but I look at it as an opportunity to help someone increase their faith. And that would be, to John, that would be my thought, is that I don't see this as people lacking faith. I can't judge where someone's faith is, but I do see every troubling situation in life as an opportunity, particularly if I can connect with them. I think God is really into us connecting, not into us being over and being controlling. And so if I can connect with the person in that situation that they're in, no matter how difficult it is, child, adult, male, female, then we can help them grow in faith. I think that to me would be the desired outcome, is faith and growth. What do you think, Dr. Fife?
Yeah, as I see even the rioting and the unrest, I guess the first thing I think about is the fact that anger is really a surface emotion. And I think oftentimes we lock in on the surface emotion and we don't allow ourselves to go deeper so that we can really connect, like Dr. McCreary is saying, and that's how we connect. We connect when we see the surface emotion, but then we go below that. I know for me, I'm an immigrant. I was born and raised in Trinidad and Tobago, and I was told these glowing things about the United States, the greatest country in the world, and certainly believe that it is. And but then I started seeing the other side of things. And then there was a lot of anger that just came out of me about what I was seeing. But under the anger, there was disappointment. And I think what we need to do is, in terms of connecting with people, trying to understand what is the emotion that is beneath the surface emotion, and connect at that level using our narrative, as Dr. McCreary says. So when I see it, I don't see a loss of faith. I see people are angry because they're disappointed, because we are not living up to the narrative that we tell the rest of the world. We criticize other nations for social justice issues, but we are not living up to the fullest potential of what we can do. So I think that's what I see. And I see that because of my frame. So what I also see, I will see my paradigm is going to determine what I see. And in that way, I think that's what we have to do. We have to look at what we see, and that tells us something about ourselves. But looking beyond the anger, I think, is really important.
Yeah. Mm-mm. Awesome.
Why don't we take I want to be respectful of time. Seems like this is a dialogue that can keep going on. So perhaps me and Micah, and if John is up for it as well, maybe we'll have another conversation. We'll talk offline. But I want to be respectful. Hama, were there a couple came in? By the way, what's popping up on my screen is your connection is not secure. So I might need a collective hug from everyone, because I'm feeling disconnected, right? But hey, it's diversity. This is how we roll, right? Let's grow. Humble, any things that came into the chat, and if we can't get to all of them, maybe throw one of them out there, and then Mike and I and John maybe take a look at them, and we'll see if we want to hop back on in a little bit from now.
Well, I threw the ones from Facebook, or the one from Facebook, into the chat, and Micah took the other ones and ran with them. So he was ahead of the game on that one when we were pausing.
Awesome. Well, I can't thank all of you enough, and Micah and John. I really appreciate you jumping right in here and being with us. Is awesome. My one word that I'm taking away from this, I said I wasn't going to go to challenge. Well, I said tonight we're going to connect and care. So let's just say we're over for tonight, because 6 o'clock was the end. I got to go to challenge now. So the one word I'm taking for myself is dedication. And to me, what that means, what Mike was talking about, is what can I do? What am I going to do to help the conversation, to be an ally, to not respond if someone yells at me? And the second level of that is, I would like to throw it out there, dedication 3 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, when there aren't riots, when it's not all over the news, what are you going to be doing to leverage what you're feeling now, 3 months from now? Because that's when I think we're going to need it. So that's it for me. John and Micah, anything else you'd like to say?
I'm just honored to be here. Great seeing you guys again, and seeing everyone, and keep the faith. Each of us has the ability to create space and an environment to bring healing, because that's who we are. We're healers. So keep it up. And
mine would be just what a joy it is. Here we are locked down in our homes, but yet we get to see each other. I haven't seen John Fife and Rob Fazio in the same room in 20 years. And so there's some little blessings that we get, let alone Susie and Kelly, so there are just some blessings that we get that are just beyond compare. And so I'm grateful. Please continue to pray for us. These conversations are tough. I've got, donors, and if they hear things that I say that are wrong, I can lose millions of dollars. And so the risks are always there. They're always there. And so to each of you who are my dear friends from Hold the Door, it's good to see you all as well. I'm out.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. And I've got to go make my connection more stable. I hope you do the same. See you next time.
Okay.
Thanks, Hummel.
Thank you. I'm finishing up the Facebook Live, and it'll be available on the Facebook page in about 15 minutes, and the other recording will be on holdthedoor.com.
Bye, Shauna. Fife, great to see you, bro.